We're getting into that very important conversation on food security. There's been a lot that has been going on. There's the locust invasion. There's a bit of intervention from the government, but is it working? And that is the reason why we're asking you, is agriculture the future of the nation? Keep your views coming on 22422. That's our SMS line. Just tell us your name and where you're texting from. At Trevor Mbija, at Citizen TV Kenya, at Zinzi_K. Use the hashtag Daybreak. Let's have this conversation and see what happens from there. Let's start introducing our guests from immediate right. Honorable Kipruto Arap Kirwa, former Agriculture Minister. Thank you for making time. We also have Lone Felix, East Africa Partnership and Liaison Officer at the Agricultural Finance Corporation. Thank you so much for making time. And Timothy Njagi, Research Fellow at Tegemeo Institute. Asante for making time as well. Tim, I'll start with you because you see the cotton, cashew, the sisal, sugar and pyrethrum industries, they used to thrive in the early years of the independence, but they've all now collapsed. Meanwhile, maize, which is now the country's main food crop, is also struggling, riddled with natural and man-made issues as well. You've been conducting research. What are you seeing?
So to begin with, this partly addresses a question on the importance of agriculture for the Kenyan economy. Indeed, agriculture is really important for our economy. So we are agriculture currently contributes about more than 1/3. I think by last year's KNBS figures was, to GDP, it was about 34%. 34%. And then when you look at contribution to GDP growth, it was about 22%. So that shows the importance in terms of the sector. And then if you also remember last year also, I think KNBS had released some figures for county. What it was showing is that in 45 counties, agriculture is the dominant economic activity. So that means that for people to transition, especially for rural livelihoods, to transition out of poverty, we really need to invest in agriculture. We've had a challenge, a number of challenges actually, in how we've managed the sector. So as you mentioned, we have cash crops that were doing very well in the 80s. Now they're almost not there. We have challenges even with our own food production. But it's important to note that the government still puts a lot of emphasis on the sector. And actually, even the pronouncement by the Treasury PS yesterday that, given that we are likely to have shocks in agriculture, they're already revising the GDP growth to bring it down. That shows that we really need and we must invest in agriculture. So the key thing is that we need to do things right and we need to get it right.
But when interacting with the farmers down there, what are they saying?
Farmers, I think we have to really congratulate Kenyan farmers. I believe they are one really resilient group. For example, we still grow pyrethrum, even though in the heydays we used to be number one in the world. Not just in Africa. We used to be number one in the world, but we still have a group of farmers that are growing pyrethrum. When you talk about coffee, currently the production is less than what we are producing to end independence. But we still have farmers who are still going that. So people have faith. I think what has happened is that we have a systemic failure in terms of systems and also policies that have not worked. So we need to change that. We need to make sure that we correct the policies that are not working, and we need to put more focus on building the farmer and building systems in agriculture.
Policies that have not worked, or policies that have not been properly implemented or hijacked by cartels or maybe people who are standing to benefit more than the farmers?
I think it's a mixture of both. So for example, the fertilizer subsidy was a policy that was aimed at helping farmers, but then it was hijacked. But then if you look at why it did not work, is that there was a problem in the way it was going to be implemented. And we are happy that I think from this year, the government has agreed to now roll out the e-voucher system, which actually, even in our own country, it was piloted in 2016. We had an e-voucher system where fertilizer is now given through the private sector, where a farmer goes to an agrovet or an ag stockist, he buys fertilizer, and then the stockist can claim that portion of subsidy directly from the government. So that works better than the way we were rolling it out.
Okay. All right, let me bring in Honorable Kipruto. Honorable Kipruto, as the former Minister for Agriculture, bridge for us how a healthy agriculture sector translates to Kenya's healthy economy, or even vice versa, a struggling agriculture economy translates to a struggling economy. a struggling agriculture sector rather, translating to a struggling economy. Bridge for us how agriculture translates to a country's economy.
Yeah, from what Njagi has said, it's very clear that more than any other sector, agriculture sector is very transformative. Transformative in the sense that it is able to touch as many people as possible.
Right.
In some of the areas, you realize that the citizenry of that area, 80% of them are engaged in the sector, and therefore it is a source of livelihoods, it's a source of food, and also at the same time, it is the prime mover for the economic activities of farmers. This therefore means that anytime you touch agriculture, you are affecting the social fabric of our nation. And that to me is very important. The second issue is that agriculture, as he says, is many farmers are very resilient because many activities that have taken place in the sector, many people would have left agriculture, including maize farming, because the very crop cycle involves being timely, in the sense that if you bring fertilizer to me for top dressing in Trans Nzoia in the month of May, I will have, it will be right. But if you bring me the DAP or the ones that you use for planting in the month of May, I will have lost a crop, because from the beginning of the rains, like in March 20th, every week that you lose in planting, you are losing almost a huge percentage of that crop.
Right.
Number two, agriculture is also subject to the vagaries of the weather, including, of course, the issue now of locusts, which is now an external factor that we should have looked at the beginning of time. Because we were warned by FAO, but we continued ignoring until it was too late.
And that brings me to my next point as former Minister of Agriculture, how the government has handled this locust invasion, the biggest one of this magnitude in 25 years. How would you grade how they've handled it?
They should have handled from inception, because they got the information earlier.
Right.
And therefore they should have been able to get to the areas, and even with the regional cooperation, to the areas where the locusts started breeding. And with a lot of prolonged rains, it meant that the locusts now had some food to consume and also multiply themselves to the magnitude that they are today, and they become a serious national menace that is likely to affect the sector. Two, we should have been able to declare as a national disaster at the beginning of time, but we are spending more time about building bridges that are going nowhere.
Bridges that are going nowhere. Are the government interventions enough for the common man on the ground?
Certainly there are a lot of things that need to be done in terms of just ensuring that the sector works and functions optimally. There are a lot of things that need to be done. If I'm just perhaps to highlight a couple of those things, one of the biggest challenge today is that the average age of a Kenyan farmer is about 60 years, which makes it to be that, you know, the younger people are not really participating in agriculture per se, yet they could provide a very critical workforce to the sector. And then number two, agriculture as a practice has been globalized, because our local farmers here require both local and international markets, and so there are issues of standards, there are issues of technical support that require. Number three, there is a need for investment into the sector financially, for that matter, because only about 4% of monies that our financial institutions give in terms of loans go to the agricultural sector. So you can imagine the disproportionate allocation, where a sector that is contributing, as he's saying, about 33% of the GDP is only getting 4% in investment from the private sector, and that injection from government is slightly even lower.
So private sector could even do more?
Yes, and it has to do more, because eventually for agriculture to function effectively, it has to be it has to make business sense. It has to be attractive to private investors. That way we make it sustainable.
Let me rope in Timothy again. I want you to paint for us an image of the magnitude of the threat that the locust invasion has had in Kenya for that farmer who is watching.
So if you look at the reports that have been reported so far, I think we're talking about, so far the numbers they put there is that we've lost more than 500,000 hectares of pasture land. We've lost more than 5,000 hectares again of cropland. And I think by the recent warning that I think was issued 2 days ago, I think they're saying that we still expect more swarms to come in. So that has a devastating impact. If you look at this season, especially what we've had in the long rains and the short rains for this year, the outlook was looking nice because it was one of we had prolonged rains. Even we had maize in Lower Eastern, which is usually not the case, because production there is usually very low. But then, of course, now if this is not controlled, then it has huge impacts, especially for the farmers. And one of the other things, again, to emphasize what Arap Kirwa said, is that when you look at agriculture, majority of the farmers, shocks means a lot. So today you can be rich. If you lose the crop, that totally have a huge devastating effect on your livelihood, to the extent that now you are not able to support your livelihoods. So in terms how we also help farmers to deal with these kind of shocks is really, really important.
But also, when you say that almost 500,000 hectares of crop has been destroyed, are we facing certain famine from the research you've conducted?
So for this year, we have two scenarios. We, on one hand, we had prolonged rains, and right now, usually it's dry, and this is the best climate for harvesting. For cereals, we still have rains, so that poses a huge challenge for cereal farmers because of, one, we have issues of aflatoxin. In the same areas, remember, for Lower Eastern, so you have a good maize crop, but you're likely to lose it because it's raining when it's supposed to be dry. And some of the interventions go even beyond, like controlling locusts. We need, for example, like the mobile dryers to be around there to help farmers quickly dry their crop. And then also remember that in 1.5 months' time, we'll be having the onset of the long rains. So farmers also need to prepare for the next season. So how are these interventions being coordinated to actually help farmers get the crop, save the crop from the devastation, and also of course for locusts, I think one of the key advices is that what is key is surveillance, so that you target them before they get to the air,
right?
And then you can actually control them at that.
So you just fallen short of saying that there's a drought coming, or there's some sort of famine, lack of food.
Yeah, it looks likely that we are likely to.
How long will that famine take, approximately?
No, so of course, if you are not able, also again going back, is that for the last, I think, 8 to 10 years, I think it's only 2 years where for key cereal commodities we've been able to produce enough to meet our demand. We've always relied on our neighbors to import to the country to help meet the consumption demands. But then remember that whatever you're facing right now is not just in Kenya, we're also facing it in the region. So one of the key things, of course, has been we need to improve monitoring, to look at the food stocks that are available in the country, and also to monitor what is happening in the region, because we cannot do this. I mean, what happens in the region has huge effects on what happens locally. So in the short term, of course, you'd expect that food prices would either start rising or remain substantially high, but in terms of how big the famine would be, I think if we manage if we have a good long rain season, we usually have a very big harvest that starts coming in from around July, August, that goes all the way to November.
Lona, how long will it take for farmers to recuperate from their losses from this locust invasion?
So we are definitely going to feel the impact of locust invasion, because as the crops, as we lose these hectares of crop, if the impact will spiral to very many other sectors. So you find a farmer who has, for example, approached a financial institution and taken a loan, and they are unable to repay that loan. That farmer is facing the possibility that the piece of land they used as security may be realized and they lose it. So it's going to definitely have a very devastating effect. And that is why it is important that the sector also establishes certain fallback plans where eventualities like these occur. How then do you caution the farmer? We have a huge demand and a huge need for aspects like insurance. If we had adequately insured our farmers, then yes, we would have lost the crop, but in terms of, they would still get financial compensation for it. But the uptake is very low, as it were, and including within initiatives that are being fronted by government. Some of them have not materialized. So there is still really a lot that we need to do to be able to cushion our farmers from such like things.
Practical solutions, Timothy, practical solutions that the farmers can take home with them.
So one of the key things I think we've also been engaging in government is that agriculture is largely a private sector driven. So in our case, where the government becomes a player, then this distorts even what interventions private actors, private investors can do. As Lone mentioned, I think the issue about risk in agriculture is quite high. So if we had a mobilization of public sector investments in provision of public goods, and then also trying to de-risk the sector to attract or to crowd in private sector investments, that is really huge. And I think also to emphasize what Lone has said, if a farmer, for example, and think about livestock farmers, when you talk about more than 500,000 hectares of pasture, that's really huge. So because between now and the time it rains, there's a huge deficit for pasture. Then also remember that most of them, when there's no pasture, you will start selling animals at very low prices. So like an offtake program would something that would mitigate that, and then you're able to help the farmers keep that money, and then they can restock once the situation normalizes. But I think for one of the key things I think right now we need to do is that we need to make sure that we get the crop out from the fields, and then for farmers, especially livestock farmers, we need to start thinking about some support, especially for provision of pasture. And I think a number of county governments already are trying to purchase pasture for their farmers.
All right.